This setup is wow. This is the best so far. This was actually Hugh's color orange because I felt like he was a brownish orange color.
Yeah.
I've been using for 2 years now. It's called a boom patch. It comes off. Like, who designed this job? All you gotta do is just come to the front. This is the way to go.
Welcome to the latest URSA exclusive. I'm with Ken Strain, a boom operator from the US, who's come to talk to us today all about really what it is to be a boom operator and the boom operating techniques, working on set, and just all the things that you never really get taught about booming.
Right.
So thank you very much for coming today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Ken, you've been doing this for over 31 years as the main boom operator on
Right.
set. Can you run us through a couple of the jobs that you've worked on?
Yeah, I mean, probably my longest term job was House MD with Hugh Laurie, and that was an amazing experience. Very obviously every day was challenging, and we boomed it like crazy. But we obviously relied on wires a lot because they do a lot of walk and talks.
Yeah.
And then I had a little stint on Lost. I did like half of season 3, and that was definitely the most physically grueling job. You know, like trudging up and down beaches and jungle and everything like that, and rain, and it was just so intense that that was a very difficult one. But then, you know, features here and there. I recently did a trial of the Chicago 7, which was a big courtroom drama with a lot of eye lines. So that was the challenge, is dealing with everybody looking in every direction.
Shall we have a little chat about like the basics for someone who's maybe about to get into this or has done a little bit of booming?
Sure.
Let's talk a bit about like techniques.
I love to, and this is really kind of like a really important part to me that I teach, is because there's been a misconception about booming that started many, many years ago when we were shooting on film and the takes were shorter, and people thought that you should hold the boom over your head. I'm going to demonstrate a little bit with this boom setup here. What I'm going with this is that we've been told over the years that this is how you boom. That you take the boom pole and you stand like this, and this is what I was taught to me. Yeah. And I did my first job like this and my second job like this, and it was hard work, and I thought it was the craziest job. Like, who designed this job?
I mean, if the frame is quite wide and you're coming in not from behind camera but from the side, you do need to get the pole high.
Yeah. So this is a realization I made, is after struggling, holding the mic overhead and shoulders burning. Does that sound familiar to anyone? So shoulders burning and burning, and you're just like, oh my gosh, and shaking a little bit and getting tired. Yeah. And having a long scene and trying to be really good at the same time. I realized, like, wait, where's this frame line coming from? And most of the time it was coming from here, you know? Yeah. But even if it was over here, I could just step back a little bit farther and just extend a little farther. So I thought, well, what if I just hold it like this? And it turned out it's such an efficient position. It almost feels like rust. So even though it seems like, who cares? What you figured out is no rocket science, but there's so many refinements that I've sort of over the years have improved and improved and improved to the point where it makes booming virtually effortless for me, with just minor spurts of effort throughout the day, like short little bursts where I have to maybe hold it out for the beginning or the end, and 95% of the shot I'm just hanging out doing it.
This kind of thing. Is it this sort of like you're
so
like tucked in here against the body? Do you sort of do a weird thing like that?
I kind of do a little bit of like a hip out. You know, this is kind of naturally what I'm doing. One thing that you'll notice on this boom pole is I've been using for 2 years now. It's called a boom patch, and I used to think it was just kind of a neat little thing, but actually it's very useful to always be keeping the pole balanced. Right. So I can find myself in the balance in any position. I can start like this and then come back like this.
I suppose, and then otherwise you'd have to be
otherwise
like this.
I have to do this, and then I come here, and my hand wants to be here, but it's stuck here. But now I have this little slide. Now what people have done to compensate for that is wear gloves. But I don't like wearing gloves. Gloves are annoying when you got to do anything else. So just keeping this patch here is nice.
It's really cool. Do you mind showing us the inside of this?
Sure. it's like has some thickness to it. It's like a fake fur. It comes off easily, and it's like a fake fur.
Yes.
And I work with K-Tech. We're always trying to find better and better furs to do this with, because the goal is a quiet, like a very quiet. The goal is to make it so it can slide back and forth on the boom pole with hardly any noise. The other cool thing that I use is this counterweight that K-Tech makes. This is a new style that's like half size. So this is more for interior. I kind of told them make a half size one because they have a bigger one that's...
Yeah, I picked up this pole earlier and it was surprisingly heavy because normally poles actually, they're quite light, but then it becomes a beast over a long period of time.
That's
but
right.
This is really interesting because like the balance here is matched out quite well. That's you know, not a lightweight there, but do you find that actually means that you end up with less, the spread of weight on your arms? How does that sort of... Does it mean that this arm's doing a bit more now? Or? So
it means basically that I'm trying to concentrate the weight overall as close to the leading hand as possible. So I want this. I want to be able to do this. If I'm doing this, I mean, come on, I could do this all day. And then of course, when things get farther and farther, obviously the balance point shifts forward, but it's still not bad. It still feels fine. And you know, and then my hand is starting to act more as a counterweight. And if I have the room, I can always just kick the pole farther back, you know. Do you have any tips for where you would stand and where you look and where you need to be able to look without... So when I'm sort of looking at the set, obviously lighting is the big thing, is that you want to find a position where you're not going to cause a shadow. You know, you want to be aware of things like the key light. You want to know what's the key, you know, and make sure that you're on the opposite side of the key. Although you can get away with being on the same side if it's a very soft key, if the logistics, if the geography of the set works better for you to be on the key side. If the key's very soft, you can get away with that. I break all the rules because you have to sometimes, and I'll put shadows out there too and get away with it because I know that it doesn't look like anything. If a shadow just looks like kind of a shadow and not clearly a boom and a microphone, and it moves when the actor moves, you can get away with it. The key is not to give up. That's what makes booming fun, is not to give up. But in general, I look for the lighting. First off, I'm like, where's my lighting? And I look, I see, okay, that's there. I'm going over here on the other side. Then I'm looking for what's the wide shot. Who's got, which camera is the wide shot? Now I want to face that camera. If the camera's there and I'm doing this, it's because I didn't learn switching. Right. So this is another really critical skill to learn, is to not just once you figure this part out of holding the boom and being steady with this, because this is a very steady position. Once you lock this in, the next skill to build is switching, which is being just as comfortable on this side and being able to like do anything that you do on this direction in this direction. And now you can always be facing the camera if you need to, or positioned in a way that works best for the geography of the set. Switching gives you all the options. If you don't learn to switch, you will have 50% of the options in my mind, or you're just going to be straining. I mean, you're going to be like, you're going to be doing a lot of this. This was always my thing, is I never learned to switch when I was booming. I knew I should do it, but when I did do it, I felt like the minute my arms went in the air, I felt like this arm just couldn't really do what my right arm, well, my left arm was doing this most of the time, right? And it was somehow, my brain seemed to operate better that way than when I turned it round. It was like holding a phone in the other hand. I don't know, you know, you're the wrong ears listening now. So how do you train to be like, you've got to train your brain with that kind of thing. That's surely. Right. So there is, I do have a method of learning how to do that. You start really easy shots. Shots that don't require any movement. So a tight shot. So, you know, a tight single, they're not moving, they're sitting down, it's stationary, no one's going anywhere. That's a good time for you to start practicing the opposite side and just training yourself to work that way. and then you gradually work your way up from there. So as a little, then you work on a little more complicated shot and a little more complicated shot until gradually you get to the point where you don't even know.
And are you right-handed? Just so out of curiosity.
Yeah, I'm right-handed, and this would be my dominant direction.
Yeah.
So like basically the rule of thumb is how you play pool. So if you play pool, this is how I would play pool.
Okay.
So this is the direction that I go, but I switch so much.
Switching is about longevity as well, right?
That's right. That's right.
Because you're really overdoing certain muscles when you're just doing this, and when you switch, you're using a different. So your shoulder muscles are being made quite tense, and to break it up is going to be better for your back.
So now you take all those forces that are coming down one side and splitting them in half throughout the day. I'm always switching. So I'm always so that means that not one side is being overtaxed. Throughout the day, throughout a project, throughout a career.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, 31 years. I don't know anyone has really managed that. I tell you, with my experiences, like I've ended up having even now today, and I haven't boomed for maybe 8 years. If I do this, I still have the after effects of booming on my body, and that is strain here, strain on my neck, strain on this shoulder here. I still feel it, because it was really putting the pressure on for these really long periods of time and not switching, and not obviously bringing it down when I could have. I think the mentality was
Exactly. And the thing is, if you go on YouTube and look up how to be a boom operator, there's like 100 videos made by 20-somethings. When you're in your 20s, you absolutely can do this and pull it off, and you probably feel like you're pretty strong and capable and amazing, and you're like, this is booming. This is what booming is. Oh, and if you get tired, just do this.
Right.
but to me, when I see this, I see a film student, because they got stuck holding the boom. I see the one who got stuck doing sound for until they can do their project. And they're like, oh, this booming is so hard, I'll just hold it like this. But if you hold it like this, I mean, you have no control.
That's not even going there. That's, you've got anything.
But all you got to do is just come to the front. And now you have total control. You have more reach. This is the way to go. Another technique that I use, and this technique really helps as far as getting, it takes the first two techniques, which is the cradle, which is like what I call the cradle, doing this, and then, or this, holding it like this. So that means if there's a camera over here, then I can be back here. And I usually, what happens is there's 2 or 3 people here. Yeah. And I can use find what I call a pivot point, where I get next to camera, and I can keep the boom low, and now I can do like a kind of a pattern like this, instead of randomly landing on the set and then getting myself in kind of a weird rowing situation where I'm kind of doing this. Yeah. And if you ever find yourself doing this, first of all, you got to hold your arms over your head, because the camera's probably over there. So now you're up here like this, and you're doing this, row back and forth, and chances are very good you're going to be late when it comes to cues. Yeah. It's hard to manage that. You don't get to play the pattern as well. So the third, I call it like the third leg in the tripod, is the pivot point. So you start with the cradle technique, switching to make sure you're always in the right spot on the set, and then that right spot is the pivot point.
So if this was you and I speaking, and Nico's camera was the main camera, you would be just only having to move it very slightly.
I could just barely move it, and I would be positioned to his right over there, in between these two lights. And then we could be talking, and I could just park it right here. But if I was coming from over here, I wouldn't even be able to see my mouth. That's the other problem, is when you can't see somebody's mouth. Because with the pivot point, you could even be a little shaky on the dialogue, because you can play the pattern of the microphone and sort of wing it a little bit. But if you come from the side and have to actually move, like row the microphone back and forth, you have to know every word perfectly, and there's no room for error, and there's no room for ad-lib, improvisation or anything. You better know it perfect. Every now and then, I'm stuck doing that, but it's rare. And when I do it, first thing I got to do is take this and make it flat. I have to make it flat. It has to be like this. Yeah. In order to do that,
way you're not able to point it, but at least you can have it flat between two people.
Because you're going to be off somebody like this. Yeah. If you have it the normal way, so you have to go flat. Yeah. So that way you can, you know. To me, these are the basics. Once you nail these 3 basic things, you can really dial in your technique as with microphones, like as a boom operator, just like making everybody sound great, and also just being on set, the diplomacy aspect, all the other aspects that turn you into a master. And the cool part is you're not going to be coming home beat up at the end of the week, you know, or end of the day. Just that fatigue, that pain. That I read people's comments like, "Who do you know a good chiropractor? Who do you go to massage therapy, or do you go to a chiropractor, or what do you do for this, or what exercises are you guys doing?" You don't need.
So you've got a 50 on the end of this pole.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about mic position and swinging and mic position. And
sure.
How you'd want to position it, say, for 2 people doing some dialogue. Swingable. Yeah.
So when we get to, first of all, I like to keep a little bit of angle like this. If you can see, just a little bit. I think a lot of the boom operators that I know, around the time that I was working, we've all kind of settled on this angle as our initial angle. So when we're facing somebody, we tend to be facing, it's angled towards them, instead of straight up and down, it's kind of coming towards them. So I'm going to start out trying to hit the mouth, get it right in the mouth like a laser. I imagine like a point hitting the mouth, and that's what I'm going for. If it doesn't sound good in my ears, I'm going to start fishing for other points, like something on the forehead, maybe more chest. But I start out aiming for the mouth.
So how far away from the head do you try and position the microphone?
That's a good question. I mean, this is sort of like a good for me. This would be like a good position.
It's just a slot by the nose and a little bit further
back.
For that.
Yeah, and then and as far as riding the frame, only if you were whispering. If the person is whispering, I'll try to ride the frame. A lot of times, I have no problem with pulling.
Taking the foam off.
The foam off. Yeah. I do it all the time. I love booming without the foam. I love the way it sounds.
Yeah, it's funny actually. Taking the foam off really can. Well, you get it's a couple of centimeters at least.
You get a few centimeters from there, and then those whispery scenes, I almost always take the foam off on a whisper scene. Yeah, nice. Because I can buy that little bit of extra space, and then just that little bit more high end that I'm collecting by not having the foam.
And how about for someone who's got an awful lot of head turns? So there's this direction, you're trying to catch, and you don't want to be too great in any one position, right?
That's right.
So how do you deal with like mad head turns?
Yeah, so I used to, when I was younger, really chase those head turns around. And then I just realized that you can play the pattern. They can fall into the pattern, and I can just kind of gently sort of follow and not radically follow. But I will come out in front more like this to handle head turns and let that cone sort of surround their head, and that the head turns will sound natural. Even if it drops off a little bit, that's kind of natural. So let's say that's my camera. I would favor coming in front towards that camera.
So this boom's live, so I will say so speaking to Pete, and then going back over this direction, and then just going back over to Pete. Maybe Nico, can you tell me a little bit about this, and then Pete? I guess, so you're allowing me to be able to come back to this position and always be good on mic.
But if you whip your head all the way around to the back here, I would just gently go towards that. Yeah. The days of me chasing that, I got in trouble once by an actor. An actor got upset with me because he was sitting in the middle of a conference table. he's talking like this and like this and like this the whole time. And this was in my early days as a boom operator when I really was trying to master the skill of, and we were using a 416, and I really was trying my damnedest to never let him go off mic. Not really understanding that I could play the pattern a little bit and just be a little more gentle with it. So I was really just following him around, and he goes, you know what, this is so distracting. Can you stop doing that? I mean, really, like, please stop. And I was like, so I was so called out on the set, you know, for doing my job. And I was like, I can't believe this guy's not letting me do my job, you know? But that was just me in my younger days. You know, the first 6, 7, 8 years, I was obsessed with the technique of booming. As I got a little more wiser, I started to realize, like, there's ways of making everything easier. Like using the microphone patterns, knowing the mics you're using, you know, just knowing what pedals to fight and which ones not to fight, and creating what I like to call team sound out of the whole crew.
I think a lot of people, when they work with the sound recorders that they haven't worked with before, they use what they are given. And I think something that you bring is you bring your own kit to a job. Even if you're not getting rental, you'll bring your own kit to look after yourself. So it's about having if you can have it back there. It doesn't bother me as a sound recorder, it's where the transmitter is, as long as I've got range. So if it doesn't have to be on the pole, that's fine by me. But a lot of people will just put up with having the heavy weight at the end, because that's just the way it is, right?
They'll just take whatever's handed to them, and see, it's become so popular to put the transmitter right here. This is like, now it's almost considered default. Is everywhere I look, every picture I see, the transmitter's here. And nobody's thinking, well, what's that gonna do to the body in 10, 15 years? Like having that extra weight, all that extra weight. Guys that I came up with never had the transmitter here, and they're all getting shoulder surgeries. Imagine now that they've added, and this weight just grows and grows and grows as you extend out. So now they're making it worse for themselves than the guys who already have it bad from before. Because they already know. Everybody my age that was boom operator, my age and up, would never add weight to the front. They would always use a cable, and they would always keep it on their waist. You know,
when you speak to, say, a gaffer or electrician, do you have any advice for that sort of that initial approach, and how you handle a conversation to try and block a shadow or treat a reflection? I guess it's just also just having a good rapport with these people in the first place. So
true. So one of the things I like to do as far as just getting that rapport is I show an interest in everyone's like work and jobs. So when I see a new light on set, I'm like, hey, that's a new light. I've never seen that. When did that come out? You know, because that means I like lighting. Like I'm interested in what it is, you know. And then just having like just casual conversations about whatever it is. I like to talk about, you know, or when I see someone do a good job. Because there's an attaboy moment happening almost every day where somebody does something good. And I love to just be like, wow, that was great. You know, just say something that's complimentary about something that just happened. That's a real, genuine compliment. You know?
That's cool.
The other thing that will get you in good standing is to be far enough in advance of a request with a request. If you try to pull that right when they're rolling, or they're, you know, if your pattern, it's one thing when something becomes a problem mid takes. But if you have a tendency to try to solve problems right before they bring the actors on, or right when they're bringing the actors in, that's something that really, you should be ahead of that. You should anticipate more. If you can get these little requests, like something quieter from props, something a little different from wardrobe, these little things, you try to make them happen as far in advance as possible, and that way there's less stress for them. And then doing that, they'll just like you more.
One of the awkward situations can sometimes be in approaching, say, an artist or a director when it comes to questions about level. It's always a thing. You get a scene and it just gets quieter and quieter. And it feels like, hang on a minute, we're quite far from where we started, and is this okay? Do you ever end up getting into a conversation with with the director or artist, and how do you approach that sort of situation?
That's right. What I don't want to do is go direct to the actors.
Yeah.
Anytime, this is something that, I probably did earlier in my career, and you do it once and you never do it again because, well, what'll happen is the scenario that plays out when you're kind of new at this and you're trying to make good sound is you go direct to the actor and say, hey, can you bring your level up? And then the actor does exactly that. And the director had in his mind a quieter scene or her mind or whatever. And like, wait, well, why are you talking louder? This is a quiet scene, Well, the boom operator asked me to bring my level up, and now it's like I've just stepped on the director's toes, So always start out going to the director. Don't even mention anything to the actors. Go straight to the director and let them know this is the problem we're having. And then from that point, you work your way back to the actor, either the director or you, figure that out.
So on a TV drama where you've got, what's sort of the average page count that you have to handle on a daily basis with like a TV drama?
Right, so it varies, obviously, usually between, 3 to 8 pages, 9 pages a day. So that's like script pages. And, 9 pages is a pretty heavy day. Sometimes it hits 11, 12 pages if it's really big scenes. The first thing I do in the morning is when they're rehearsing, I brought some sides to show you. I'll use highlighters like this, Sharpie ones, there's like 10 here. And there's other brands too, but you want a lot of different colors. And I'll just go through and I'll just kind of, take my sides and go through and just color them, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm trying to eliminate the step of reading each person's name all the way down. I've assigned the colors to the names. I know visually like who's who with the color. This was actually Hugh's color orange because his hair was brownish. I felt like he was a brownish orange color.
Yeah.
So this was Hugh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I figure something out visually to match the color up,
Yeah.
And then I go through and I just do this while they're rehearsing that first scene. And it's just my chance to acquaint myself with the dialogue and the rhythm and everything like that as it's written.
Yeah.
And what this does too is especially with complicated scenes, you get a very complicated scene with a lot of different people talking, and it can seem overwhelming. But once you map it out with colors, certain things become obvious. Like maybe you've got a 4-page scene with 5 people, but one of those 5 people only has 1 line. You wouldn't know that at a glance if you didn't color it. You'd have to read through and look through, and it also makes every page look different. So you get this sense of like difference, and it just makes it quicker to find like what you're doing, where you're at. So with a pen, I'll write, let's say 1 next to the lines I'm going to boom, 2 next to the lines I believe my second boom will do, and then lines that neither of us can reach, or maybe they'll require a plant mic, I'll put W. So I'll just put a W there, just right off the bat. That's going to be on the wire. It won't really, it's not too critical or whatever, but it creates a plan for us. And then that way I could communicate this to the mixer and he sees, okay, what do you got? This. Mixers love when you have a plan. When you've watched the rehearsal and you've laid out exactly who's doing what, it makes it very easy for them to do their jobs.
And do you have any tips for like nailing down like cues for when you're about to leave someone? Are you watching other actors for like cues that they're about to speak and getting caught out by that, or is it based on the last phrase that they say?
Right.
What sort of tricks do you use to
memorize?
Memorize everything. Surely.
I know. And actually, William Monroe, a boom operator in Los Angeles, has a good one. It's better to be early. It's better to leave early than arrive late.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, are you talking about just in life in general? And he goes, no, when you're swinging the mic, it's better to leave early than arrive late. So you can actually, if you're kind of on the edge of two people talking really quick, you could actually kind of just feather off the person's very tail end of that line straight to the next person talking, and it's going to sound completely smooth. So, but also that comes with knowing pickup patterns and anticipating how your mics are going to work, and knowing the point where you got to split it into two.
Yeah.
Over time, you'll develop like a library of situations and locations and places where you know that the microphones sound good, or you know where they don't sound good, you know. But I've surprised myself with where I've used microphones where people say they won't sound good and they did, and where they were supposed to sound good and they didn't. So, you know, like using a CMIT in an echoey conference room.
Yeah, one of these.
You know?
Yeah.
Right. So this mic is, you know, a wonderful workhorse mic. I use this mic every day, and I really know this microphone. It's one of my favorite mics. It has a huge amount of reach, nice pickup pattern, off axis. It just lowers the level. It doesn't get all, you know, weird sounding like the 416. You know, if you miss a line with a 416, you can really tell.
Yeah,
if you're late or miss with this, it's just a little less level. It's not so dramatic, you know?
Yeah. It's easy, isn't it? If it goes a little bit wrong, for that to then kind of tumble into more problems as well. It's like a mental mindset.
That's kind of like the stay on target thing, right? Like, so when you miss a line,
it all goes
your brain goes, shit, I missed the line, and that is going to make you late for the next one. So you have to make this quickest note that you missed it and get right back on track. And not beat yourself up. Because it's too late. That's the past. That literally, even though it happened half a second ago, that's the past. So you have to keep moving along and stay on target, and that's really tough. But yeah, that's you know, that's one of the things you learn too, is how to keep going even though you messed up. You know you messed up. You know, when I'm positioning the microphone, I'm using my ears as well as my eyes. So I don't 100% trust my eyes. I'm trusting my ears.
Yeah, the parallax thing can be quite difficult if you're side on to someone, or even straight ahead, just knowing whether you're actually bang on mic. Because obviously if you're there, but compared to there's a big difference.
Right.
And that's not much. But if you're like 15 foot away or something, it's not that easy.
So now you got to really use you got to really kind of like bring the accuracy in with your ears. And sometimes I'll enlist the help of the other boom operator. I'll say, am I a little short? I feel like it's a little short, or you know, how am I? And sometimes we'll coach each other and be like, you know, come in a little bit, you know, because it'll look like it's dead on and it's not. But you see, I also hear it. It's because I've been listening to these mics for years. So I know when I'm off, and you know.
What mix do you like to hear in your ear on set?
So the mix that I prefer hearing is, I want to hear the mix of the wires and the boom.
Right.
I always want that mix, because if we have a situation with the wires, I know exactly how to fix it. I'm hearing the problem. There are times when I do just want to hear the boom. And that's usually when the wires sound great, and I'm trying to boom, but for whatever reason, the mixer's favoring the wire, using the wires, and is not really using the boom. I want to hear the boom. I don't like having headphones around my neck. I don't like having my ears. So I noticed that some boom operators were wearing in-ear monitors. So I found out about a company called Ultimate Ears. There's a few other companies out there. But yeah, you go in, they scan your ears, and then you can choose which model you want. And I just find them very comfortable. It's not that they sound way better than over ear. They're just more comfortable. Like I can wear a beanie over them. I can wear a sun hat over them. I don't feel them at all because they're molded. But yeah, like these are my in-ear monitors, and I just keep them, you know, usually around my neck. A piece of advice that I want to give people regarding headphones is, throughout the day, we have one ear in. We're listening, you know, we're listening to the set. So we're doing our thing in between setups, and, you know, we're running errands, we're fixing mic, we're putting stuff together. and we're listening to the set. And we might leave the set for whatever reason. So all day long, one ear is in.
Yeah.
Over time, you're going to degrade the hearing in that ear, I discovered. Because I noticed that when I would put a phone in my ear and I switched to the other ear,
So
the
much
brightness
louder,
came in.
Yeah.
And I realized I spent years and years and years with my right ear in. So then I went to an audiologist, and they told me that this ear was down. The higher frequencies were less. And so now I'm telling everyone, especially at the start of their career, alternate that ear that you keep in. Like do maybe 6 months, set a timer, set a calendar thing, switch ears. It's gonna feel weird to do that, but it's gonna be, you're gonna, like switching the boom, you're gonna just slow down the aging of that ear, one ear.
Do you have one ear in and one ear off during a take? Or?
No. Anytime I work with anybody that does that, there's no way. There's no way you can really be spot on with one ear in. You really need both ears in. I've seen people work with one ear, and I've watched them be off, and I hear that's off. You can't tell. You're getting phasing basically from the other ear. So it's really hard to tell if you're on or off. You got to have both ears in.
Right, okay. Yeah. Your custom boombox is also really cool. Do you mind just running us through what makes it quite unique?
Yeah, so a lot of people see this. When I take this around and teach, people kind of gravitate toward this thing because I designed it a long time ago. A boom operator in LA named Craig Kishi made a very basic stand, and he basically, it was the column and these two plates, and this is all billet aluminum. And I thought it was a great idea, but I thought it could be expanded. So I created it, I had to build a box. These kickouts right here, these come out, and all of them wing out. So you get 3 coming out, and then if it's a windy day, you're outside, you just throw a sandbag down, and now this thing has a huge profile on the ground, and yet it's still easy to pick up.
I like that it says move if necessary. I guess this must have come from some complaints about
I know.
Just do it. And obviously you've got 2 water bottles there. That's really generally a very good thing to have.
Yeah, so 2 water bottles, keeps me hydrated, especially with exteriors, like working in Hawaii, when you have in the sun and the heat. I got my cool water and everything in this little box. Is perfect for hanging belt packs. So a belt mounted transmitter hangs on here very safely, very nicely. Because I love gear, I've been playing around with these Radius mounts, and Radius is kind of a new company, but they're based from Ryco.
From Ryco, so it's quite, it's got wiggle, but it's not too. It's relatively stiff. Is this the way in, facing in? Is that what?
No,
right.
No, no. They face them out, and it's stiffer out. I found out that when you face, I like that you can just mess around and create whatever you want out of it. It's like Lego. It's like a Lego mount. You do whatever you want. So for microphones like the 50, which are very sensitive to handling noise, I really want a lot of bounce. I've always wanted a lot of bounce, and with this setup, I had to go slightly stiffer on these Radius mounts when I brought them in, but now I've got the perfect amount of wiggle here. So it really bounces around a lot, but it's quiet. I mount this towards the back of the body, actually. So one principle to reducing handling noise is this first point of contact the point of contact that's closest to the diaphragm. You want that as far back as you can go. The closer you get to the diaphragm, the noisier it is. So a lot of times people have these mics set up, and they just kind of do it like this.
In the middle or towards
right in the middle, like this. That's fine, but if you're really serious about cutting down handling noise, you put it like that. Little knot in this cable cuts down handling noise here. And then to reduce noise directly from the pole, I have a little isolator from Hydamic. This is Eric Leake's company, and it just gives a little bit of wiggle here, and that just cuts down noise, let's say from the cable in here. So that, because I'm running a coiled cable here, which is not particularly noisy, but it helps with that. Like this setup is wow. This is best so far in my career for a 50. One of the things I've gotten into is using a monitor on my wrist. And this lets me see a frame. So I've got a few screen grabs from things my friend shared these with me, but that's basically what I'm seeing, kind of a wide and tight.
And you're seeing this on your arm, or you're seeing this planted somewhere?
So I see this on the phone, and I took an armband. I used something called Quad Lock, which is a company that they make cases, and they're designed to go on bicycles, but then they kind of expanded what they can go on, and they made a little thing for joggers and an armband for joggers to snap it on, and I added foot foam to it to make it smaller so it can go on my skinny little wrist. And then I take this little ring off, I snap it out in, and now I'm booming like this. And I can sit there, I can watch what we're doing, and I can play around because it's fast. So I can play around and just dip. I can come in, operators see me do this. They know I'm just looking for the frame. So I do this for wide shots. Not really, I don't need this for tight shots, but a wide shot that I can boom, as long as I'm close to the frame, I can really nail how close that frame is. That's just another tool that I use, and I advocate for it, even though everyone says, know your lenses, know your lens sizes. You obviously need to be familiar with them, but there's a point of precision that I get by referencing an actual live frame and just bouncing my mic off the top and going, okay, that's that. I know exactly where that is, and then kind of keeping an eye on it, which is cool.
Do you have much back and forth between you and the sound mixer during takes even?
Right. So some sound mixers, I've worked with some sound mixers who want the mic always as close as possible to the frame. I like playing close to frame. I naturally want to be very close, but I don't want to be dangerously close. And there are times when you're getting into a shot that's like a medium shot, where the tighter the frame is, the margin for error is like, if you are near the frame and you just like breathe, you're gonna pierce the frame lane. Now these days it's not such a big deal. They're getting rid of booms like easily now, but still you don't want to be poking in for no reason. You want to have a good reason for actually getting in, like it could be a very difficult shot or whatever.
Are there any sort of like mistakes that boom ops can make in sort of going a bit too far and potentially taking too many risks? Like any sort of advice about sort of mistakes that you can avoid?
Yeah, definitely when you're choosing your position for the frame, you want to keep in mind the scope of the shot, the scale of the shot. I mean, there are times to push the frame and times to just kind of back off, especially if they're shouting. There's no need to be right on the frame. And also, good advice for when there's two booms and you have a second boom who's covering over the shoulder. That boom doesn't necessarily need to be sitting on the frame, riding the frame, pushing the frame at all. It needs to be more of a match to the primary boom, a similar distance. Just hearing that sometimes, if I'm booming what's on camera and then the off camera sounds like a dynamic mic held up close, that's jarring to me. Like it should be sounding pretty close. And being overzealous can get you in trouble if you're a second boom. I learned this the hard way in Thailand when I was on this movie called The Quest with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Roger Moore. And I was kind of I was still a rookie, but at that dangerous phase where I thought it was great. And I just lucked my way into this job with David Stevenson and Jerry Bates, like a huge sound team from the 90s. They did Four Weddings and a Funeral, Braveheart, and so they're greats. And I'm just this kid who talked himself into the job. And now I'm covering, we set up a boat-to-boat shot where Roger Moore is on this big boat and Jean-Claude Van Damme is on a smaller boat, and there's pirates and people everywhere. It took hours to set this up. The boats were maneuvered. it's a big action sequence, and then there's this pause in the action, and Roger Moore takes his gun and fires at Jean-Claude, and we think he's shooting him, but all he's doing is shooting his handcuffs open. And it all takes place in one beautiful wide shot, as well as several other cameras covering. And here I am covering Roger Moore.
Yeah.
His back is to camera, and I'm trying to get him nice and good with my 816. And then as soon as we call cut, I hear the German camera operator screaming. And he comes to me, he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, He goes, "You were right when it happened. Your mic came right in." And there was a playback guy from Ireland, and he played it back. And sure enough, like almost like a comedy, my microphone coming right in, just as like the big moment happens with the gun and everything. And it was so funny. Peter McDonald was ghost directing, and he just rolled his eyes and he said, "You know what, let's just do this like TV. You know, we'll get a tight shot on the handcuffs, you know, and reverse, whatever. Let's just keep going, you know." But it took hours to set up.
Hey, you losing your aim, Dobbsy?
What's your name, son? Christopher Dubois.
And you know, this is like, I've been a boom operator now at this point for about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So I'm shaking. I just ruined like this is the biggest movie I've ever worked on. It was like $40 million budget, set in the 20s, and I just ruined like one of the biggest shots in the movie. And I felt, you know how it is. You feel horrible the rest of the day. But that was a good lesson in that, an expensive one, that you don't ruin the primary shot trying to get the off-camera dialogue. You don't risk it. You just do what you can, not make it sound too tight. You know, just similar angle. I like to keep 45 degrees away usually if they're playing relatively tight, just to reduce the phasing effect, you know, assuming you don't have noise problems if you're facing the other way, whichever mic,
facing a noisy direction.
You're facing something noisy like a fan or something in the background.
Interesting to talk about that, because obviously if you are in an environment where you've got a lot of noise coming from one side and you're bringing it on, taking it away, bringing it on, taking it away, that noise comes and goes with a very directional mic. Is that something where you've what sort of approach do you have there?
So the way I tackle that is, first of all, it depends on how bad it is, but also the microphone I'm using. So the 416 is really susceptible to this. You know, that was one of the biggest challenges of the 416 and really kind of made me feel handcuffed. And this is, for instance, this is not a 416, but it's the same size as a 416, so we know that this is a CMIT. But when I do this with the 416, the background noise will really come up, and then it'll come down this way, and then come up like wherever the background noise is, if I just aim towards it. So I'm sort of forced with the 416 to keep a very like vertical situation with this. And it limits me, and I don't like feeling limited at all. Whereas the CMIT and the 50 have a different, the way they handle background noise, their pickup patterns are not so sharp. They're wider, and because they're wider, they're always getting a little bit of background noise. So the background noise level stays more consistent and smooth, and that means I can do this even if I have a background situation, and the background won't change that much. It's small, but not really much. So I feel much more comfortable being able to swing a mic like this, even with a little bit of steady bed of background, because it is not really changing that much. When I brought the 50 out, when I took over on house, and the show is being done on a 416, and I just didn't like the way Hugh sounded on the 416. I thought he sounded a little shrill. And then I brought the 50 out of the truck. I said, let's use the 50s. And we took over the show with the 50s, and Hugh's voice sounded, I thought, much more natural, like the way I heard him sounding on set, you know? And then, you know, we got 3 Emmy nominations and 2 wins.
I like using these outdoors, and inside this is a 41, an MK41.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So for walk and talks and fast-moving stuff, so
Yeah.
this is good. But then we found like outdoors, this sounds gorgeous because you hear, say, the woods.
Yes.
You know, if you're in a
Yes.
lovely and interesting or acoustic environment,
Right.
this will hear the noises and it will
Yeah.
hear the dialogue, right?
Yes.
Is that a similar kind of
Yes,
thing?
same thing with
you
the
don't wanna-
50.
you don't want to cut that off, right? Yeah.
So we had an interesting situation on House where we were doing a scene on the beach in Malibu, and it was a very windy day, and the waves were pretty heavy,
Yeah.
and we went with the 816, which is what you're supposed to do.
Very, very directional.
Very directional, very like, okay, you're isolating. But still, even with the isolation, there just didn't seem to be much like depth and sense of like the voices, like richness to the voices. We're just kind of getting the voice and isolating the background as much as we could. So then my boss, Fawn Varga, said, once we went in for coverage, the 816 just wasn't great. So he says, let's try the 50. So we jerry-rigged a 50 to be outside. And there we were on the beach in Malibu, booming with the 50. He goes, oh, that's so much better. So the background came up a little bit, but everyone's voices sounded so much smoother and nicer and richer. And we were like, wow, a 50 on the beach. No one would ever imagine such a thing. So the point of this is, try different mics for different in places where you don't think you could use a mic, because it's surprising. I would use this on like a hardwall interior. That's to be expected.
Yeah.
I discovered that you can use this microphone, the CMIT, also in a hardwall interior.
Yeah.
If you go for the forehead, the top of the head.
Oh, okay, not so.
If you aim for like right here,
Yeah.
you can actually. It's maybe not quite as good as
It's
that.
like a bathroom situation.
Yeah,
like,
so let's say this is your only mic. You can't
Yeah.
afford two mics yet. Go for the forehead, the top of the head. It'll help.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about booming underneath? Do you have any tips for that?
Absolutely. Booming underneath. So just kind of like, let me actually illustrate a little bit with this. Common mistake, booming underneath. So when people come underneath, sometimes they'll come underneath and they'll come very close, like this.
Yeah.
And when you're this close, it sounds like a news anchor, like holding a mic close. It doesn't sound natural.
Yeah. So feel like my voice while you've got it there.
So that's
yeah.
gonna sound
Okay. Again.
like that.
Yeah. Right. So.
I know. We're gonna just take a listen to from above.
Okay. So yes, microphones above this time, and then.
Now, what I can actually get the similar sound of his voice from below if I come out in front a little bit like this.
Okay. So Mike's now a little bit more out in front, not directly lower to my body around here.
So this is how I expect. This is how I boom from underneath. I come out in front and aim forward. So even though there's a little more space here, because it's below, it's kind of it's very direct, as like in front of the mouth, and it will sound like almost a perfect match from overhead like this.
Yeah, and the mic's back above.
So the advantage to this is two things. It matches the overhead, and it gives the actors room to work with props and do their thing.
Yeah, because the hands are always such a thing, aren't they? Yeah.
If you shove a mic in front of them like this, it's very invasive. If you put it out like this, it doesn't feel so invasive for them. And also, big important thing to do is when you're going to come from below, tell the actor. Say, I have to come from below. Just letting you know I'm coming from below at the microphone. I'll keep it in front of you like this, but I will be coming from below. So this is a really, really important thing to do, is to mention it, to actors.
One of the big challenges that I faced, and as a recordist that I have a challenge with, is when you're recording incredibly high dynamic range scenes. They
Right.
go from very quiet to explosively loud.
That's right.
And trying to get the boom to be nice and close for the quiet, and then to preempt the loud, but not to be too far away, so the acoustics of the room suddenly are more present, and then to come back, and it's challenging to find the right balance. And I'm sure to boom, it's also equally challenging. Have you been in situations with that, and what do you do?
Absolutely, and there's many ways to tackle that, believe it or not. First of all, you have to make sure that your level is correct on your headphones, because you could be backing off too little or too much if you're not writing the right level in your headphones as the boom operator. Second, you're right. You have to find the right amount of distance to go before the acoustics becomes a problem. So this requires maintaining like a very tight communication with the sound mixer and telling, and they listen to where you go, and they'll have to ride gain, but you're going to help them out. And sometimes that involves pulling up, and if there's not enough room, you're in a low ceiling, that's going to involve going off to the side.
Yeah.
You know, that's a completely legitimate
So if I was
procedure.
about to scream, what would your boom position? How would it change?
So if it just
I'm not going
depends.
to scream.
Obviously, in this room, it's very echoey.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to come up very much. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want and the mixer would have to do some extra work there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the thing that could happen is that it might not work right for the transmitter. I mean, I did a scene on Woman in the Window that involved a very low level that went to screaming. And the way the sound mixer chose to tackle that is to run a hard line.
Yeah.
So we bypassed the transmitter because that has a limited amount of dynamic range, and he just rode the gain and the levels from the mixer with the hard line.
Yeah.
So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it, and it's a legitimate way, because I did this on Silicon Valley, is have two booms set up. One set for the low level and one set for the hot level.
Sure.
And then that boom will kick in for the screaming. So we did that. We had where it was quiet, and then the character started screaming like bloody murder. And so we had a second boom gained way down to get that part.
Yeah.
So we can have the two booms next to each other, because one's only going to work at one point and one's only going to work in the other. So that's a clever way to deal with that. And then some mixers have so much trust and faith in their limiters that they actually don't want me moving at all, or moving very little. They don't want me coming up. They don't want to hear the room at all. They'd rather it hit the limiter and limit, on the transmitter end. So there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, but it's in those moments that you really, as the boom operator, have to communicate, be in close communication with the mixer and see what their style is, because they all have a different way of handling that. And if it involves running I like being wireless boom. It gives me a lot of flexibility, but in those instances, running a cable makes sense. It's just going to help them help the mixer record it better.
Have you ever had situations where people have just become distracted by mics just because of where they are? Or is that a sort of, like, just because, I don't know, if I don't see my hand now, but I do see it now. So I can imagine maybe just being, I don't know, I can imagine an actor genuinely having to really focus to just ignore. I mean, obviously they have to ignore cameras and everything else.
It's a weird thing to do something with somebody holding a pole with a mic overhead. It's a bizarre.
This leads into eye line as well, because you end up looking, where am I going to look that I'm not physically catching someone's eye? I find myself looking at actors all the time in the eye when they're doing their dialogue as well. You can't really help it, because you have to sort of engage with them.
So there is, that can be a problem, because in a very intimate scene, you could be right in their eye line. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of keep my eyes off. If I don't have to do too much in the scene, if I'm kind of just maintaining position, I'll kind of just check and look away. I kind of use a little bit of like my peripheral vision to keep myself in line, and I'll just kind of like focus on something else and just dart my eyes back just to make sure that everything's kosher, just to give them that space, because I don't want to be there. They know the constraints of the set have forced me there. I would like to be off to the side. I don't want to find myself lining right up in an eye line. But there are times when lighting, reflections, shadows, whatever, and you are stuck right there. So in those cases, I try to just glance, occasional glances to just double check.
Do you have any advice for like things to wear on set as well to sort of blend in? I mean, I guess black.
All neons. I'm not a purist about this. So I this is the one thing where I feel like I think being your true self is better than being just a dark ninja stagehand. So I think just darker colors, like, you know, more neutral, even dark grays, darkish grays, you know, just neutral colors really, but on the dark side of the spectrum. You don't have to wear navy blue or midnight blue and black every day. You know, you can wear jeans, you can look like a normal human being, not like some kind of like special film set, like ninja, you know. Some people are obsessed with being head to toe black. Unnecessary, 100% unnecessary. Just don't wear a bright white t-shirt, you know, or anything like that, or you'll bounce a lot of light.
A big part of your job as well is actually getting the wires on the casts as well. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that process and how that sort of fits into your day, and what any tips that you're happy to share there?
Yes. So I think the sort of nature of my job in the past few years has changed in that respect, because now it's more like the third person, the second assistant sound person. It's now become more their responsibility.
Yeah, to do radios.
So they tend to be, now they're the person doing it. I used to be the person doing it. I grew up doing it. I wired thousands of people. I wired almost everybody on a house every day. I had a little bit of help from my, from my utility, who became very good. But in general, we had so many casts to wire all the time. I was right there wiring people, and I sort of had my people, and they had their people, and we sort of divided the cast that way. But I really enjoy doing it. I've always enjoyed wiring. I think it's a very kind of creatively challenging thing to do. So I have a lot of little go-to techniques. Actually, one of the ones that I wanted to show you, what I like is when URSA came out with these really thin, soft, like fuzzies. They're so soft and thin that they don't register much.
They don't make a lump. Yeah.
They don't make a lump.
That's really what we wanted to avoid. Flat enough, soft enough.
So this furriness is really useful against anything. It's a good buffer, you know, for fabrics, against fabrics, or even against hair. So I like to use these down here in the sternum, you know, if it seems like there's a potential of rubbing, and also gives a little extra wind protection, you know. I like to just cover the mic with this. It's acoustically transparent, and you know, if it bounces a little bit, and it also just doesn't show if it touches on camera. There's different ways of doing hairy chests. There's tape you can put across a hairy chest, and you can put it on that tape. But for instance, with Hugh, you know, Hugh was doing on House, he had a limp. And Hugh has pretty coarse hair on his chest, and he has this on the show, he had a limp, and he wore collared shirts that were buttoned to here, and he had a jacket over that. And when I came on, they pretty much had solved this problem, and then we got it down to using furries. And so we put a big furry on over the microphone and faced it in towards his chest. And the brand new furriest furry you could imagine. And this would, for some reason, work so well against his chest hair, and you just didn't hear the noise. And it would have been a nightmare with all that movement and this gimp and everything like that. Long walk and talks. Worked. It just worked. No matter with wiring, you'll have your go-to, and then you're going to have that one person that shows up that it just doesn't work for. Just doesn't work.
Quite often I've seen on lower budget productions, producers will be asking for a solo sound person to operate the boom and to mix. And this, it happens a lot in doco, but I'm concerned this is becoming more normal in sort of scripted drama, low budget scripted drama. Anything you might want to say to people looking at trying to justify the value of keeping these two roles separate?
I know. So I mean, the only thing I can really say about that is that I think it's just a matter of teaching producers that we're all here to capture performance. And if you just have one person doing sound, as if it's just like some part that you're supposed to have is a sound person, instead of treating the sound department as a part of capturing performances, then you're just going to end up with dialogue that is going to be mostly on the wires. It might sound good on the boom and some, but you won't have this consistent sound. And one of the tricky things that suffers with that is, let's say you've got the camera now doing an over. You're doing the coverage, so now you're doing the over. And I heard this on a job I did where it was a 2-person sound crew, so with the mixer and me. So every over, we have the wire, and the boom is on camera. So when they're cutting,
Doesn't sound.
what happens? Yeah, when they're cutting, every time we cut to somebody, the person on the over sounds like a wire. And then when you cut back over, the person who was on the over went from sounding like a boom to sounding like they're on the wire. So every off-camera or over-the-camera person sounds like a wire, even though it's 2 people in a room talking to each other. It's so annoying sounding. And it's hard. Sometimes it's like, are we the only ones that hear this? Because I guess producers don't notice this or just don't care. But you just don't have that consistency of sound. That when you get, having 2 boom operators, or a first AS and a second AS, splitting a scene in 2, you're going to have this nice consistent sound when you cut.
Yeah. Just quickly, actually going into that, how do you feel about the role, the title, boom operator? Because obviously your role is expanded upon so much more massively than just the boom with radios and everything else. So, is first assistant sound something that you're beginning to call yourself, or how do you feel about that title? Because it kind of fits in with the camera world, or first assistant camera, second assistant camera.
It does, but it doesn't. And we've had this debate in a Los Angeles group.
Yeah.
I prefer boom operator to first assistant sound because I don't think that my job is to assist the sound mixer. We are collaborators. We break down the scenes together. We come up with a strategy together, and they sign off on it. I say, we're going to use this mic. We're going to do this. I'm going to put a mic here. This is going to be on wires. This is going to do this. Okay, great. Just let me know so I can make the assignments, and and then I'll make it work from there. So, or he'll have an idea, and I'll talk about my idea, and sometimes our ideas don't match, but we discuss it. And it never really feels like I'm his assistant. I'm more like their team. We're collaborators. So me being the title of boom operator is the sound person on the floor, the sound person on the set. So he's the sound person doing the recording. I'm the sound person who's sort of supervising the capture of the audio. And then the utility is that's the person who's assisting both of us.
Sure.
So in a sense, they are assisting, and my department is the boom department, and their department is the recording and mixing department. And that's how I prefer to see it. I really have a hard time with the assistant, but I understand that when it comes to figuring out rates and things like that, making these people sort of see the value in what we do. And if that's how they're going to do it, that's how they're going to do it.
Well, is there anything you look out for, particularly for people coming into the industry?
Sure. There's a few things that, people who are kind of working their way up. I like to meet new people who come in to sort of day play, or second assistant sound or utility. That position is where we can get newbies coming in and seeing their potential. So that's my place to sort of evaluate. And I can, within 6 hours, I know really what's up. And there's some things that stand out for me that are good, and things that stand out for me that are bad. So let's start with things that stand out for me that are bad. Talking a lot in general, and talking a lot about your experience and what you've done and all those things. Don't care. You're going to impress me just by staying quiet and following orders and doing exactly what we say and putting things exactly where we tell you they go. Don't assume you've got a better spot for it. You're just going to throw us off. Don't assume anything. No assumptions. Act like tabula rasa. As you know, I'm assuming that you know basically about microphones and all that. And then maybe asking questions. Always good to ask questions. Where did that go? Why do you do this? I love that. Just ask me, relevant questions. Also, if you have, be interested in booming. A second AS who says, I don't like booming, I don't like to boom. That's immediately will not be in my phone. That number is not going to make it to my phone. I need someone who actually actively likes to boom. They might not want to be the lead boom operator, but they should have an interest in booming, because otherwise every shot's going to be torture when I bring them to the set. It's going to be like having to position them like a Lego piece every time. Listening, booming with both ears, not just one ear. Ask questions, you know, don't assume anything. Cover all those bases and you're going to be called. You're going to get called for more work, you know?
All right, that's great advice. All right, well, thank you very much, Ken. That's been really cool. I mean, massively helpful and useful advice, and rare as well to get someone with your experience to talk about your work.
Appreciate it.
Really
Yeah. No, I love this. I have a passion for booming. I love the being, you know, involved in the getting the performance, and I don't want this art to die out. I feel like it's on its way out, and it shouldn't be. I think we should devote more like attention to learning about how to do it better, and it starts with saving the body. Once we can save the body and not have it be such a strain on the body, then we can focus on really mastering it and giving it the love and attention that it deserves, you know.
And definitely worth mentioning that Ken's recently released an ebook.
Right. So I've started my education, you know, company. It's called Boomright, and the focus of it, and it's going to keep growing, but it started out with the top 3 things that I was teaching at every Masterclass for the past 8 years, in which you got a piece of here. So it's a 45-page ebook, and then there's like a video you can get to go with it that I illustrate all of those concepts too. But this whole Boomright project is going to keep growing. I think if you just type in Boomright into Google, it'll pop right up, or Boomright Foundation, because it is the foundation of everything. You get that part right, and then everything else gets easier.
All right, cool. Well, hope that's been useful, and we're also going to have a chat going behind the scene, looking at some scenes that you've worked on and talking much more in depth about just that one shot and all the planning that's gone into that.
Right.
So yeah, so if you've enjoyed this, then check out that video too. Thanks.
Cool.